we can now say that this is justice, finally.
Richard Allen is found guilty in the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German.
This was a long trial with a lot of expert testimony that is very, very complicated.
A verdict more than 7 years in the making.
I knew we would get to this day.
A town ready to finally put this trial behind them.
This town had a lot of love that was waiting for this day, and we are one again. Tonight we'll be able to go to sleep knowing that we're all safe again.
Our coverage of the Delphi Murders verdict starts now. Guilty. You watched the verdict happen right here on WISH TV just a few hours ago. Good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Sanchez. The case started on February 13th, 2017, when Abby Williams and Libby German were dropped off at the Melancon High Bridge in Delphi. The next day, their bodies were discovered. Now, Richard Allen is guilty of their murders. We have team coverage for you tonight. Let's get right to ITMate's Kyla Russell, who was in the courtroom when the verdict was handed down.
I was about 6 feet from Richard Allen as that verdict came down. He showed little to no reaction, but his family certainly did. I watched as his wife and his mom cried as each count read out guilty. It came as a surprise to them, but certainly not to some.
Not surprised at all based on the mountain of evidence we heard against Richard Allen.
That evidence led the jury of 12 to find Richard Allen guilty of killing Abby Williams and Libby German near the Melancon High Bridge on February 13th, 2017. As each count was read, followed by a resounding guilty, the families of Abby and Libby sighed, holding hands. Libby German's grandmother and Abby Williams' mom embraced. Words they've waited to hear for nearly 8 years.
I imagine there's a certain sense of relief, but still sadness because nothing can bring these girls back after the horrific things that were done to them.
The jury deliberated for about 19 hours in a 21-day trial, one of the most high profile in the history of the state. They considered a mass amount of evidence. 64 people testified and 378 pieces of evidence were admitted. The evidence included a series of confessions where Allen admitted to killing the girls, confessions the defense called the result of psychosis from being held in solitary confinement after his arrest. They all had to agree. The judge asked each one of them if they agreed to a guilty verdict. Each one said yes.
Sitting in that courtroom and listening to the prosecution methodically stack the bits of evidence against Richard Allen one by one until the stack became so very high it just seemed insurmountable.
The jury was immediately taken back to their hotel in Lafayette, where they've been sequestered for nearly a month. The judge has kept a gag order in place. That means the family cannot speak to media. I watched as defense attorney Jennifer Auger comforted Kathy Allen and said it's far from over. Richard Allen will be sentenced December 20th at 9 a.m. Reporting here in Delphi, I'm Kyla Russell for WISH TV. WISHTV.com or follow us on Facebook for updates.
Kelsey German, the sister of Libby German, shared a photo of the two and this statement on social media tonight following the verdict. Thank you for all your love, support, and prayers. We truly couldn't have gotten here without it. I'll share my thoughts once the gag order is lifted and the holidays pass in December. Well, there is plenty more reaction from the community of Delphi. News 8's Danielle Zukoski was part of our team coverage. She joins us now. Danielle.
Phil, there were mixed reactions as people learned Richard Allen was convicted of all 4 counts in the Delphi double murders trial. But for the most part, we found people unwilling to talk to the media after years of scrutiny in the public eye. The small town of Delphi, Indiana, is ready to close the chapter that is the Delphi double murders trial.
You know, it's over. Just thank God it's over.
For the most part, people on the streets were unwilling to talk to the media in the hours after finding out Allen was found guilty. No media signs were hung on many of the businesses around the courthouse. The one woman that spoke to us on camera says justice was served.
I'm really happy and pleased with the verdict. The state of Indiana should be proud.
Another man spoke to us off camera. He says people in his life do not believe this to be the correct outcome, but says it ultimately does not matter because he was found guilty. Many in the community hope the family can find peace and move forward after this verdict.
It's a chapter that will be behind them. Remember the great things that those little girls brought to them.
This quiet town is ready to become quiet again as the frenzy around this case dissipates. I'm Danielle Zolkowski for WISH TV, WISHTV.com, and follow us on Facebook for updates.
All right, Danielle, thank you very much. Emotions were high outside of the court when the verdict was read. I-2's Cody Fisher has that part of our team coverage.
It is very calm outside of the courthouse compared to just a couple of hours ago when this entire sidewalk was filled with people anxiously awaiting the verdict. That was the scene outside the courthouse as WISH TV reporter Kyla Russell told the crowd that the jury found Richard Allen guilty. With the verdict sinking in, people who live in Delphi tell us they're relieved.
I just had a positive feeling that God was going to guide them in what direction they needed to go in.
Because God was in this courtroom this morning with that jury. They couldn't make a harder decision.
Not everyone outside the courthouse wanted this verdict. Despite that, we did not see any arguments over how things panned out. Now, the people of Delphi just want peace and healing.
I could hope for nothing more than to see this town come back to one again.
I think they protected this county, and now this county needs to heal.
The next stage of the healing process will begin on December 20th, when Richard Allen will be back here in court for his sentencing hearing. Reporting in Delphi, I'm Cody Fisher for WISH TV, WISHTV.com, and remember, follow us on Facebook for updates.
Now, earlier tonight, I spoke with Mario Masalamani. You may recognize him as a member of Indiana's best political team. He's also a noted criminal defense attorney, and I got a chance to ask him why he thinks the jury came to a guilty verdict after more than 15 hours of deliberations.
I think there were a couple things that made the jury come to its final conclusion. The most damning would be the confession. And there were multiple confessions by Richard Allen. And, you know, it's very difficult to listen to somebody confessing to a crime and not take that for face value. I know the defense had a tough road by talking about the mental illness, talking about the fact that he had been in solitary confinement for about 8 months prior to confessing. But the fact that he confessed to the crime without, it appears, any sort of coercion, any sort of force, then, you know, I think that's very damning. And it's hard for a jury not to find a person guilty when they're confessing to the crime.
Now, the case has taken more than 7 years to get to this point. Abby and Libby were dropped off at the Monon High Bridge on February 13th. 2017. Their bodies were found the next day on the 15th. Police released photos of a man known as Bridge Guy during the trial as their main suspect. The images and audio of him saying down the hill were captured by Libby's phone. Police arrested Richard Allen in October of 2022. His trial began 2 years later on October 14th. The jury began deliberations on Thursday and reached that guilty verdict today. We've been following the Delphi Murders trial ever since the beginning. You can catch all of our coverage online right now. Just grab your phone, scan the QR code on your screen. That will take you to WISHTV.com, where you can catch up on every key moment from the trial.